Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name as we pivot to the task of building stuff in the oceans of tomorrow. Now, this is kind of a cute little story from Colorado. They just passed this real onerous gun control bill, gun ban, basically. So a lot of times what these places will do when they ban guns, they'll have this big giant buyback program. So you take your guns to this location and you turn them in and they buy them from you, and then they hand them over to the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department destroys them. So these lethal weapons are removed from society where they no longer can serve to protect you from those that mean you harm. So always you have these buyback programs, especially in a state like Colorado where so many people are armed. So they do this. Boulder County, Colorado Sheriff said, look, let's have a big buyback program. Y'all come, bring your guns, we'll buy them back, and then we'll incinerate them, and you will be safer by the moment. Well, they tried it, but they had to cancel it because the law that they just passed made it impossible to have this buyback. Now, the deal was the logistics, this new law required that every gun holder submit to a background check. So you even own a gun, you got to submit to a background check. So you're going to come and sell your gun and so they can buy it back and you can get some money and go off and buy popsicles for your kids or whatever. You got to go through a background check. Well, the system, this InstaCheck system that they use is not mobile. It's not portable. It's stationary, stuck in one place. So they couldn't take their background check device, computer, whatever, to the place where they were doing the buyback of guns. So they had to call the whole thing off. So now in Colorado, you can believe it or not, the sheriff of Boulder County is forcing people to keep their own guns for their own protection. Outsmarted themselves completely. Speaking of President Obama yesterday talking about build the economy from the middle out. And by the way, this is weird, but I have lost my stack of stuff for today. I have no idea where it went. Now, Rob Gardner has always threatened to come in here and take it from me when I'm not looking. And so I'm thinking he's on vacation right now, but I'm thinking maybe he hired somebody to sneak in here and rip off my stack of stuff so he has plausible deniability. I'll ask him about that when he gets back. Anyway, I don't even know what happened to it. It's a mystery to me. It's just flat disappeared. So we're kind of winging it from here till the top of the hour. Please call 888-589-8840. Bail me out, 888-589-8840. Here is one of the stories that I snatched from the burning or whoever came in and stole my stack of stuff. This is a Wall Street Journal article, and all President Obama can talk about is the middle class. I saw another story a couple of weeks ago, and it researched speeches from prior presidents up to and including Barack Obama, and they discovered that Barack Obama has talked about the poor less than any other president they've ever tracked. All he can talk about is the middle class. Cares so little about the poor, he's not even talking about them. So he cares about the middle class. That at least that's what he says. We got to build this thing from the middle out. So the Wall Street Journal has written an evaluation of that, appeared in their newspaper today, this morning. And they just make the point, we've talked about this before, but it's worth reviewing, that middle-class incomes have fallen under President Obama. Median real household income has fallen by 5% since, not just since President Obama took office, but since we were told the Obama recovery had begun in 2009. Middle-class income down 5%. So hard to believe that he's going to make things better for the middle class. His track record would indicate the exact opposite. I've got a piece here on American Thinker. Let's see who is the author of this piece, if I can find his name. Richard Terrell, I believe. Maybe it's not written by him. Maybe his name didn't print out here, but it's on American Thinker, and it's about his effort to run a business in the city of Detroit. You know, you've heard all this business. Capitalism destroyed Detroit. Republican policies destroyed Detroit. And our point is government destroyed Detroit. Socialism destroyed Detroit. And this guy talks about his own experience trying to run a business in the city of Detroit. He makes the observation we made before at the beginning of this piece. In 1950, there were 296,000 manufacturing jobs in the city of Detroit. Today, there are less than 27,000. 90% of the manufacturing jobs in Detroit flat out disappeared. And he says this: government, federal, state, and local, made this happen. Until 1984, I was a business owner in the city employing about 20 people. I moved my business 60 miles away. I didn't want to leave, but I was, in effect, forced to leave. And he was talking about, it wasn't just that we had to fortify our buildings. They talked about fort building. They wound up with a lot of these businesses with chain link fence and barbed wire, like a prison camp, to keep people from breaking into their businesses in off hours. It wasn't just the abysmal education system. 47% of people that live in Detroit are illiterate. He says the kind of job I ran, I did not need highly educated people. So it didn't matter to me that they hadn't graduated high school. Taxes were high. That is true. But he says, here's what killed my business. What really killed Detroit, what drove me away, was the government deciding it knew how the market should operate better than the market did. The market operates on a simple concept: an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. If an employee doesn't think he is being paid enough, he can leave. That's why there's no point in complaining that you don't get paid enough money. No point in complaining about that. If you're not getting paid enough where you are, then take your skills someplace else where somebody will compensate you for the labor that you believe you deserve. I think everybody is paid what they're worth. Everybody's labor is compensated based on what they're worth. And if you don't think it's compensated at the worth, then go find somebody that recognizes the true value of your labor. So that's how it's designed to work in a free market. If an employee doesn't think he's being paid enough, he can leave. If an employer is unhappy with an employee's performance, he can fire him. That's how it's designed to work. But he says government programs like unemployment insurance, workman's comp, and wrongful discharge killed his business. In Detroit, he says hiring someone became the worst thing an employer could do, and being fired became one of the best days in an employee's life. In other words, you're an employer, you let a poorly performing employee go. That ought to be a good day for your business because you can replace him with somebody that'll do a better job. But he says that's the worst day of an employer's life, and you would think that getting fired would be the worst day in your life, but it turned out to be the best day in your life if you worked in Detroit. He says, when I left Detroit, I had 20 employees, but 10 years earlier, I had 5. As the business grew, I had to hire more people. As it turned out, to get one good employee, I had to hire about 8. So to get that additional 15 people to round out his workforce of 20, I had to hire over 120 people. And he had to let them go because they did not work out. They weren't up to speed. They weren't up to snuff. So only about 1 out of every 8 employees that he hired, he was able to keep. So the other 7 he had to let go in order to get one good employee. But it started to get really, really expensive. When an employee left my employ, whether by quitting or being fired, they immediately went to the unemployment office where they were given unemployment payments. The likelihood that the state would grant them benefits was extremely high, maybe 80%. If you protested, you had to appear before a state referee who was, unsurprisingly, very biased in favor of the claimant. In the financial reports I was mandated to send to the state, it was all too obvious I had not paid nearly enough to cover the costs of the benefits the state paid out, so the state then hit me with a surcharge and my unemployment costs soared. But as bad as unemployment costs got, they were nothing compared to workman's comp. If you were on workman's compensation, it meant you were injured and could not work. So an employee always went for unemployment benefits first, and when they ran out, suddenly discovered that he was injured, usually with a bad back. In Detroit, an employee almost never won a comp case. The employees won them all. Bad back, even though it's completely fabricated, manufactured, the employee would win, and the employer then would get dinged. After a period of time, my insurance company put me in what was called the assigned risk pool, What that meant in practice was that my workman's compensation insurance costs doubled overnight. Every new employee hired became a huge financial burden, not in terms of wages, but in terms of unemployment and workman's comp costs. Now, think about that for a minute. That's money that was not available to pay higher wages to the employees that he had. They're the ones that are hurt by this. They're the ones that are nailed to the floor by this kind of abuse. Perhaps the scariest thing that can happen to an employer is being summoned in front of the Civil Rights Commission to face charges of wrongful discharge. That is, you fired somebody who didn't have reason to do it. Here, you had to prove a negative that you did not violate someone's rights. This happened to me 3 times. If the commission determined you were guilty, which happened 2 out of 3 times for him, he says, the remedy was to pay all of an employee's wages from the time he was separated from your employ to the time of the commission's finding. Thus, an employer could be faced with paying as much as 2 years' salary because of how long it took for one of these cases to work its way through the system. He says, this was enough to get me and hundreds like me out of Detroit. It was government that shut that city down. It's government that's turned that city into an absolute wasteland. 78,000 uninhabited structures. Most of the fires that start in Detroit are people committing arson in one of these uninhabited houses. A third or a fourth of that city is completely vacant. It's going back to jungle. They're having to send bulldozers in there and knock these derelict homes down one after another. What did that? It was government, ladies and gentlemen. It wasn't the GOP. It wasn't capitalism. It was the government that did that to Detroit. So you want to see what socialism does? You want to see what President Obama's socialism will do to all of the United States of America? Look at Detroit, and you are seeing what we will become if we do not get our minds right and get more people like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Rand Paul in Washington, D.C. We'll be back with more of your calls. Stay with us. Those of you that have been waiting, we'll take your calls right out of the chute. Focal Point AFR Talk. Remember to call 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840.